Okay, in this lesson, we're going to start by looking at the contents of strings, their locations in memory, and how we can compare them. So let's start with a new string. We'll call this one string 1, and we'll make it equal the word hello. Okay, let's make another string. We'll call this one S2. And this time we'll use our new constructor. So new string, and we'll also make this string's contents equal to hello. Okay, so there are two different ways that we can compare strings. One is, let's system out print line. One is to use the equals equals operator. So what this question is asking is, are the strings at the same reference, right? Do they have the same reference? Maybe that would be a better way to say that. Do they have the same reference? It is not asking, are they holding the same contents? It's asking, do they reference the same location in memory? Okay, then the way that we can compare their contents is S1 dot equals S2. Okay, and dot equals is a string method, and it's going to compare the contents rather than the references of those two strings. So let's go ahead and compile and run. Okay, we get back false for the equals equals. Do they have the same reference? Right? They do not have the same reference because they're two different strings. S1 has its own reference pointing to a location in memory that holds the string hello. S2 has a different reference, a different address that it's pointing to find that contents of that string hello in memory. Right? So we get true for their contents because the dot equals method is not looking at their references, but rather is comparing the contents of the two strings. So hello and hello are the same contents. Those are being compared, and that's why we get the true back. Okay, now it could also reassign a string. So I could say string S3 is equal to S1. Okay, now let's look at the output of these same two methods. So we'll copy those, paste them down here. Okay, so let's compare and see, is string 1 equals equals string 3? This is asking, do they have the same reference? And then we'll compare their contents using the dot equals method. So let's compile and run. Okay, so our last two questions both returned true. Okay, S1 equals equals S3. This is asking not about their contents, but their reference. And when we took the object string 1, we set it equal to string 3. That created in Java what's called an alias. So now the same object in memory, the word hello, has two different variables with the same reference, right? They have the same reference and they're pointing to the same word or string in the memory. Okay, the dot equals, again, is comparing their contents. So an alias is always going to have the same contents because it's pointing to the same reference, the same memory location. Okay, so the dot equals method, let's just make ourselves a note. The dot equals compares the contents of the strings. Right? Do they have the same contents? Okay, now let's consider some other string methods. So we could system out print line, and let's do string 1 dot char at, character at. and we'll do the character at element 0. So when you are thinking about strings, okay, each one of these place values, if you will, of the characters in this string is assigned an index, a number, and they go in order starting at 0. So H would be index 0, E would be index 1, then 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So the index of each character is starting at 0 and then consecutively increasing by 1s. So if I output the character at element 0, it should return an H. So let's go ahead and test that. Okay, and there's my H. Okay, so the char at method, oops, let's make ourselves a little note here. So this method is going to return the character at the given index. Right? The index is what you put into the parentheses as the value passed by parameter to that method. Okay, another commonly used method would be index of. Okay, now index of, instead of putting in the index for the character, we're going to put in the character and it's going to return the index of that character. So if we ask for E, the letter E, okay, that is going to return the index of the first time that character appears. And that's reading from index 0 up. So let's go ahead and run. Okay, and E, the letter E is at index 1. Remember, H is 0, so E is 1. Okay, now let's make this a little bit more interesting. So we'll add an import for our scanner. So java.util.scanner. And let's go ahead in our main and we'll instantiate a new scanner object. So scanner, we'll call this one KB for keyboard, is equal to new scanner, and we'll do system.in for our location. Okay, and let's, in our prompt, we'll tell the user to enter a color. Okay, now let's take this string and we'll call it color instead of string 1. And then we'll grab that from our scanner input. So KB for the scanner object. And then next line, we'll just go ahead in case they use a 2-word color. We'll do next line instead of just next. Let's go ahead and get rid of these 2. Okay. So if I wanted to know the last letter of the color that the person typed in, I can't really put in the index specifically for that character because I don't know how many letters are in the word that they typed. Yellow has more letters than blue, for instance. So to overcome that, we're going to use a method called length. So we're going to do color.length. Okay, that returns the length, or how many characters are in the string, and then we're going to subtract 1 from that length. Okay, so we're going to do the color dot character at to get the last letter returned, and we'll know the last letter is from the length -1. Now let's think about what if they input the word yellow. So yellow has a length of 6, right? There are 6 characters in the word yellow. So that's going to be a 6. But if I were to return the character at index 6, that would be after the W, because we start at 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So character at 6 would give us an out of bounds error, an index out of bounds error, because it would be outside of the length of the string. And that's why we subtract 1. Okay, so this is going to return the last character in the string that was input. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that. So run. And we'll go ahead and enter yellow, and there's the last letter of the string that we entered, right? The W shows up underneath. Okay, now let's just force that error that I was talking about, where if we forget to subtract 1 from the length, what happens? And we're going to end up with an index out of bounds error. So let's go ahead and compile, and we'll take a look at what that error looks like. Okay, so we'll type in the word yellow, and there's our error. So let's scroll up here a little bit so we can see the details of this error. So we've got an exception in thread main, right? And here's that error: string index out of bounds, exception. Index 6 is out of bounds for a string of length 6. So that's why, again, we have to do a -1. Length -1 would be the last index, right? In a 6-letter string, it would be index 5 to retrieve that last letter. Okay, now let's play with that index of method. So system out print line color dot index of, and let's go ahead and see, is there a letter O in the string that the user inputs? So let's run it. So this first time, we'll go ahead and put in a string with a letter O, and there we're told it's at index 4. So remember, starting at 0, 1, 2, 3, and there index 4 is our letter O. Okay, now what if we change that to a letter L? Okay, this word has 2 L's in it. So let's go ahead and run. And we'll enter yellow, and notice the index of is returning the index of the first occurrence, going from left to right, right? Index 0, 1, 2. It's returning the index of the first occurrence. If I want the index of the last occurrence, there's another method that we can do, which is called last index. And if we do that last in front of the index of method, now this is going to reverse the order. It's going to start looking at the end of the string and going towards the front of the string, looking for the index that has the last occurrence. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do yellow again. And there we can see that index 3, right? That's the last index of the letter L. Okay, now what happens if we put a word in that doesn't have a letter L in it? So how about pink as our color? Okay, the index of method is going to return -1 whenever that letter does not exist in the string that we were looking for. Okay, another method that you'll use quite a lot in this Java course is substring. So if we take color.substring, and we want to print just the first character that's entered. So we could do substring and then we'll do index 0. Okay, so in the parentheses, right, the arguments that we're passing are integers, and these are the indices of the first letter that we want returned, and then the last letter, right, and it's going to print from the first, including the first, up to, but not including the last. So let's go ahead and run this. Oh, I forgot a parentheses. Got to debug here real quick. There we go. So we'll compile and run. And we'll put in yellow again. And there's the first character, right? Because I made a substring going from index 0 to index 1. It includes the first, but not the second. Okay, if I wanted to print out the first 3 characters, right? This would start at 0, 1, 2, and that would return YEL. It will not return the index 3 because substring goes from the first up to, but not including the third. So let's go ahead and run that. Oops, forgot to wait for the prompt. Here we go. And see, there's my index 0, 1, and 2. It goes from 0 up to, but not including 3. Okay, so let's put some of these things together to write a program that makes a little bit more sense. So let's say enter your first and last name. Okay, that'll be our prompt. So we'll change this variable identifier from color to full name. Okay. So if I wanted to output just the person's first name, let's think about how we could do that. So to separate the first and last name in the string, the person is going to enter a space. Okay, so we're going to want to first grab that that space. So before we print anything, let's grab that int, and we'll call this the index that we're looking for. So index of space would be more descriptive. And that's going to be our string, full name, dot index of, and then we're going to put the space inside the string literal. Okay, so it's going to be looking for the blank space between the first and the last name. Okay, now we're going to do full name dot substring because we want to output just the first name. That first name is going to start at index 0, right, with the first character that was typed, and then it's going to go up to but not include the space. So index of space. Okay, so let's go ahead and run. Oh, whoops, I did it again. Always forget that second parentheses. Okay, let's compile again. Okay, so first and last name, we'll say Harry Potter, and there's Harry's first name. Okay, so now let's go ahead and find the last name. So So we'll system.out.println, and we're going to do substring again. Okay, but this time we're going to start at the space. So index of space. Now remember, the substring is going to include the first element in the parameters here, and we don't want to include the space, so we're going to do a +1 so that it skips the space and starts at the very next index, which would be the first letter of the last name. Now, when you're doing a substring from an index all the way through the end, you don't have to include the second parameter. You can go ahead and just stop with one parameter, and it's going to output the substring that includes that first value all the way through to the end. So let's go ahead and compile and run. And we'll input the same name, Harry Potter, and there we've got the first name and the last name. Okay, the last method, string method that I'd like to go over is the compare to method. So rather than print these two strings, I'm going to assign them new names. So we're going to let this first one be the first name, and then the second one we're going to call last name. So those are now stored first and last name from the user input. Okay, now we're going to system.out.print, and let's do first dot compare to, and then in the parentheses we'll put this, oh sorry, not second, we'll put the last name in there and compare them. Okay, so let's go ahead and compile and run and see if you can figure out what the comparison is actually returning. So Harry Potter, and we get a -8. Okay, now let's run it again, and this time I'm going to use letters that you should know the ASCII values for pretty quickly, and then we'll see if that makes it a little easier for you. So Albus Dumbledore. Okay, A, capital A, remember, is 65 in ASCII, and then that would mean capital B is 66, right? 67, 68 would be D. So the difference between those capital letters in the first and last name is a -3. Okay, so we can use the compare to method in order to evaluate alphabetically which comes first in two strings. Okay, so again, 65, right? Then -68 for the capital D, that gives us a -3. Okay, when you get a positive number, that means that the second string is closer in the alphabet to A than the first. So for instance, if we were to reverse these, so we do, last compare to first, right? Now it's going to reverse the order of that subtraction. So it's going to take the 68 minus the 65 for capital A, and it's going to return a +3. Okay, so we'll do Albus Dumbledore again, and there's our +3. Okay, now what if they're equal? Let's see what happens if the first and last names are the same. So if we did John, right, then we get a 0 in the compare to, because we're taking the same ASCII value and we're subtracting it from itself. There are a whole lot more string methods that you can use in your programs. If you look at the Java API, remember we're in version 8 for the string class, you'll see lots of them. There's like to lowercase, replace all, lots and lots of different string methods that you can use. But the ones that we've gone over in this lesson are some of them that are tested in the AP exam. So we want to make sure that you're familiar with character at, index of, last index of, dot equals, dot compare to, and substring.